It is with great pleasure that I would like to introduce our guest speaker. John McDougall was born in a small community in Ontario. He joined the military in 1989, and he was arrested and jailed for being gay in the military prior to being it legalized. He has carried on his advocacy work for many years, raising the first pride flag on a military base and working to ensure equality and inclusivity in the military, and also bringing them to the same at the Edmonton Police Commission. John McDougall.
Good morning, everybody. So if you'll permit me, I'll give a little bit of my background and then we'll get into what happened in the military, what changes have happened and where we are now, and sort of leave a benchmark on how they're doing and what else they need to look at changing. So as I was introduced, I was born in a very small white Anglo-Saxon Protestant town, the youngest of 6 boys in a Catholic family, which means, of course, the youngest is supposed to become the priest, and that didn't pan out very well. I ended up going to college in a fairly large center, and it was at that time that I found the gay scene in Toronto, and that opened my eyes significantly, and I started to actually feel comfortable with who I was, and I was happy with that. It was that brief moment of, I'm okay, I'm in a spot where I'm accepted and it's fine. Finished college, I moved out to Alberta. I joined the military in Edmonton in '89, knowing full well that at that time it was illegal to be gay in the military. Never thinking it would be an issue, not expecting it to rear its head. And in all honesty, I was hoping joining the military would change who I was. It would ungay me. It did in fact change me in ways that I never anticipated, and all for the better. So in the early 90s, I was posted to a small base in Wainwright. And we had British soldiers that come over and train in Wainwright at that time. And we were at the drinking mess and having a few drinks, shooting pool. And I chatted up one of the Brit soldiers. I thought we had a connection. I thought we were on the same wavelength of what our interests were. He declined my invite. And then I had assumed that was it. That was the end of the story. But it wasn't much later that I had the military police and the RCMP knocking on my door to arrest me. And they said, it's illegal to be gay in the military. You're under arrest, come with us. They put me in cuffs and they put me in the back of the military police car. They drove me up to the military police barracks. They parked on the very far side of the parking lot. They waited for the soldiers in training to form up. And then as soon as they were formed up, they took me out of the back of the car and did the proverbial perp walk from the car to the police station or the police barracks. They put me in cells there. Later, because it was a federal offense, they took me to the RCMP jail in Wainwright. And I spent the night there. My boss came by the next day to pick me up and take me back to the base. And on the way back to the base, all I heard was, you're a disgrace, you're disgusting, you're not what represents the military. How dare you embarrass me? It was heart-wrenching because I'm just a young guy. My family doesn't know, nobody knows. And as a matter of fact, when I was first arrested and I'm sitting in the jail in military barracks, I asked to call the military lawyer. We have our own justice system. And I called Ottawa and I spoke with one of the judge advocate generals. I said, I need your help. I've been arrested. And he said, what were you arrested for? And I said, I was arrested for being gay. He said, good luck, and hung up on me. So going from being scared to petrified to how am I ever going to recover from this? My career's over, my family is over. The commander of the base in Wainwright called me up to see him, and he said the same thing. You're a disgrace. I don't want you here anymore. I'm going to send you to Calgary. I'm going to put you in with an infantry unit, but don't worry, I've told them who you are and why you're going there. I went down to Calgary, and it was terrible. As soon as I arrived, they knew that I was there because I had got arrested in Wainwright. I was taunted and tormented. I was beat on pretty regular basis. Fortunately, there was somebody in the medical unit down there who was forward thinking and understanding. And they came and spoke with me and sort of calmed me a bit and arranged for me to get posted over to their unit so that I was no longer in this horrific environment. But I'm still stuck with this label. I'm still stuck with all these taunts. So it got to the point where I have to decide, what am I going to do? Suicide attempts were not the way out. Unhealthy amounts of alcohol were certainly not solving the problem. So am I going to stay in this environment and try and affect change, or am I going to wash my hands of it, walk away, and let other people have to live through this? So again, I spoke with my ally in my unit, and I said, I'm going to stick around. I think this is an archaic way to do business. And no one is going to tell me that I can't be a good soldier and I can't be a good paramedic because I'm gay. That does not negate my skill set, nor does it negate my dedication and commitment to my country. So it sure sounded good when I said it, and it sounds good when I write it down. It didn't really change very much until about 1996, 97. I was overdoing some work in Bosnia for 7 months, and a message came out saying that same-sex benefits are now allowed in the military. So I sent a letter back to my partner, and I said, we're going to get same-sex benefits when I come home from this tour. So when I got home, I went and spoke to our administrator at the unit, and I said, I'd like to apply for same-sex benefits. And they said, sure, but we won't sign anything in my office. I don't want this on military property. We'll meet at Tim Hortons and we'll sign the paperwork there. And I said, that's not going to happen. This is military paperwork. This is a military policy. We will sign it in your office. And begrudgingly, he agreed to that. And we got the paperwork signed, and we were not the first, but we were one of the first to take advantage of the same-sex benefits that the military offered. So life got a little bit easier after that. I mean, there was still lots of hate mail and lots of snickering behind your back. Things continued to heat up in the world, and I had to go on other tours. And I was faced with a dilemma because we were getting more into the Middle Eastern countries, and I faced a double threat: the threat of danger for the environment and the area that we're in from a war perspective, but also in those countries, being gay is illegal and it's death penalty. So while I'm watching what I'm doing from a tactical perspective, I have to be careful in what I write in my letters. I have to be careful what I say on the phone because they're able to tap into our phones. So it was still a challenge to think that after all that time, I still can't communicate freely. So that it sits and niggles in the back of your head every time you do something and everywhere you go. I had a remarkably supportive unit in 2013, and I asked my boss if we could put up a pride flag on the base. This was early June. Military bureaucracy, I expected they'd say, let us think about it, we'll get back to you, and next year maybe you can raise the flag. But my boss said, I'm asking permission, but I'm sure it will happen. And the base commander at the time, his wife was facing the glass ceiling as a female officer. So he understood our struggles, and he agreed in less than a week that we could raise the pride flag on the base. So in between jumping up and down and screaming like a little queen, I had to figure out, what am I going to do? How can I make this work? And who do I want to be an ally to help me with this? And the first person that came to my mind was Murray Billett. So I told Murray what was going on, and I asked if he would be my shield, my shoulder to lean on when this happened. And of course, Murray was grateful to be part of that. And that was the first time a pride flag had been put up on any base in Canada, North America, and most likely the world. But I don't know if that's just hopeful thinking, but and that did not go completely unscathed. I had a significant amount of hate mail. Comments on social media were gutting. I even had one person send me a snail mail hate letter. Fortunately, he was good enough to put his return address on it so I could turn it over to hate crimes at Edmonton Police Service. So again, thinking that we have this flag up now, we have all this acceptance. We had a huge function where we had a turnover of our leadership, and we went to the craft, I think it's a craft beer pub downtown. My commanding officer at the time came up to me in a crowd of military leaders, put his arm around me and said, "Hey, cocksucker." And I can say that because that's what you do. We are now looking at 2016, and that's acceptable to say that. I think I was more disappointed that none of the leadership spoke up and said a word. I just set my drink down and I walked out. I probably could have said something. I probably could have piped up. I probably could have made a stink. But I think the culture at that time was still, oh, look at that soft, delicate little thing. You can't take a comment. So sometimes it's better to just walk away and pick the battles that you're going to fight. 2017, I'm sure we're all aware, the Prime Minister provided an apology to the community. The military actually paid for me to go down to Ottawa to sit in the gallery and be part of that. That was remarkable. I got a nice certificate from them. On one side was the apology, and another side was a letter from the Prime Minister. Following that, the Chief of Defence Staff at the time sent out an apology letter as well, which was surprising considering the mess that he's in now. And after that apology happened, the military started to change the way, I thought the military started to change the way they were thinking. They asked me if I would sit and be the advisor to the Army of the West on all matters LGBTQ2S plus. I was privileged to have that position. We sat down, talked about what needed to get done, and that's where it ended. For 3 years, there was no movement, there was no traction, there was no interest. The commander was more than happy to sit in an armored vehicle while they drove around the Calgary Stampede, but they didn't have the moral fiber to stand beside me as we raised pride flags on the base. So when I faced him on that, it did not go over well. He told me that that's my opinion and I'm entitled to it. So we had a change of leadership again. And now we have a much better organization. We have units that are now raising the pride flag for bi, trans, and homophobic days of remembrance. We have Pride Week, we have the flag up. And again, another first, we had our pride flag put up in the middle of the training area in Wainwright when we're doing military exercise. We've never had a flag put up in the middle of the field. So that was a pretty exciting moment. The military has decided that we are now part of the Defense Advisory Group. Every other minority had a say in how policy gets built, but our community never did. So this year they have made the members of our community part of this Defense Advisory Group. The only thing that was missing was being part of employment equity. Fortunately, this year, I just got an email last week. They are in the process of formalizing our community as part of employment equity. And I'm excited to see how that's going to pan out. Also this year, we got a crosswalk put in on the base. We have an inclusive pride crosswalk. They chose the location specifically. It goes between our base clinic and our field medical unit where I work. I would like to think that my boss advocated for that spot just as a sign of respect for the work the unit has done, and perhaps without sounding too big on myself, a bit of a nod to the work that I had done. So that was kind of exciting. So where are we now? We had in 2018, we had a lawsuit go up to the government for those of us that were involved in the purge. If you're not familiar with the purge, I would encourage you to watch the National Film Board's presentation of the fruit machine. It's pretty horrific. A lot of people had it significantly worse than I did. Hunted down, forced out of their jobs. So this lawsuit came up, and it was called the Purge lawsuit. Those of us that were part of the lawsuit, we were formally recognized. We had a letter sent to us. For those that are serving in uniform, we have a citation that we can actually wear on our military uniform that is pride colored, that shows that we were survivors of the purge. And they also gave us a lapel pin to wear for our civilian attire. And that was a little anticlimactic. Filling out the paperwork was terrible. Having to relive all these events, and when you think you'd put the most of your traumas and damage behind you, you have to face these demons again. It was powerful enough that facing those demons made me realize that it's obvious I haven't dealt with the trauma of the arrest and all the hatred and vitriol sent my way. So I do what every good, tough, macho man does. You put it in a pressure cooker and you let it sit on the back burner and forget about it. So this year I was asked if I wanted to put in for the sexual misconduct lawsuit that's going against the military and the RCMP and public service. So I started doing the paperwork for that, and I broke right down. I couldn't finish the paperwork. So I started to see someone for mental health for that. It's a bit of a process for me to unpack all of that stuff. However, I think it's certainly for the best. Getting to mental health was a huge chore. Not only the ability for me to let my guard down and say I'm vulnerable and I'm not this tough armor wearing guy, that I'm actually just John. When I first went for mental health on the military base, it was in the early 2000s, and they had said to me, "We can't talk to you right now because we're busy with real veterans, the guys that went to Afghanistan." So I hadn't gone to Afghanistan, so I wasn't fitting in with their schedule. I took that pretty hard. So I figured that makes me a second-class veteran for another reason. And I guess I really don't need help, and I'll just struggle through this on my own. As I said earlier, suicide attempts and alcohol abuse did not fix that problem at all. So I spoke with my doctor earlier this year, and he agreed that he would find me somewhere off base, so I'm not dealing with the military mental health system. And that has been, again, an absolute godsend, working through that. So with that sexual misconduct lawsuit, it sort of plays nicely into where we are now in the military. Having the defense advisory group, having this employment equity group, I think will pay dividends. People won't just be told they have a voice, but they have a seat at the table where their voice can be heard, and they can affect policy and they can affect change. The military is a huge machine. The public service is a huge machine. Nothing's going to change on a dime. But I am optimistic, cautiously optimistic, that by opening this up and having not only our own advisory group, but sitting at a table with all of the advisory groups that will have an opportunity to have our voice heard. I'm sure you've all seen in the news the issues with leadership in the military and their inappropriate sexual behavior. That leads to a multitude of problems. Everybody is leaving in higher positions because they all have skeletons in their closet that they don't want revealed, or they just don't know what's in their closet and someone will dig it out for them. And how does that affect us? Well, everybody's leaving and nobody wants these lead positions because they're afraid of what's going to happen. So the trickle down of that becomes these advisory committees and employment equity committees lack the appropriate leadership for movement because there are so many vacancies. They prioritize where these leaderships need to be. And unfortunately, the defense advisory groups and employment equity groups are not high on the priority list. So again, that's why I say I'm cautiously optimistic that there will be change. We have a new defense minister now, and finally it's somebody without military experience. It's somebody from the diverse community, and she's female. And I think those three things are probably what the military needs. It's been a very old white boys club for a long time at leadership. And I think that this change will be what's going to affect the change. When, I don't know. But I think having this person who has no ties, our last defense minister was an ex-police officer and an ex-service member. So you bring that baggage of being military into that job. She does not have that. And I think her position, her desire for change, and the fact that a female in charge gets to see all the wrongs that have been done to the females in the military, she will be the action for change. She's already decided that serious criminal sexual crimes will be prosecuted in the civilian court instead of the military courts. So that takes any potential for favoritism, old boys club out of the equation. The downside to that is the criminal court system is already overwhelmed, and I'm not sure how speedy justice will be. The military justice system is designed to be speedy and effective, but I don't think that's always in the best interest. If something doesn't meet the threshold to go to this criminal court on the civilian court system, then it still can be dealt with internally. Our own military justice system can deal with those that don't meet the threshold for criminal courts on civilian. So I think there's still a long ways to go. I think we are miles ahead of where we were 33 years ago when I joined. I have had probably a dozen people in the last 2 years come into my office to talk and come out to me and say that they feel this is now a safer spot, a spot where they feel they're a team member and they're not a gay soldier. They happen to be a soldier who is gay. And being able to differentiate between those two makes it comfortable, makes it a good work environment. And I'm amazed that kids are coming to me or coming to other people and coming out of the closet, where for so many years it was so forbidden. It was a hidden secret. And now it almost gives me hope when I see these young guys not afraid to come out, not afraid to express who they are. I have assisted 4 people in a transition process through their counseling, through their surgeries, because the military does that now. They have everything from psychological services to voice to specialists in hormones. They have everything we need to help service members transition. That never would have happened 15 years ago. So there are these incremental movements. And I suspect if we were to look at individual yardsticks, we could see movements on how we identify those yardsticks. If we put everything on one stick, I think you would see it's still pretty slow movement. But I think those small movements, again, give me that optimistic outlook that things will get better. And that's pretty much all I have from where we were to where we are now and what challenges we're facing. So if you would like, Jan, Larry, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm happy to expand on anything, whatever you folks would like. I'm happy to speak about.
Wow, John, that was incredible. I think we can open it up to question and comments. And if you want to use the chat or if you want to raise the hand, we'll try to get you all in. We have a comment from Murray Billett who says, question for John. Thank you for all you do. And what are the moments that make you most proud?
I would say there are probably 3 moments that make me the most proud. The first would be when I graduated from basic training and I got to fully wear my uniform and look in the mirror and be really happy with who I was. The second moment was when we raised the pride flag in 2013. That by far the most memorable, the most proud moment. And probably the third would be when the military had the opportunity to march in the Toronto Pride Parade in, I think it was 2006, was the first time the military was allowed to participate in a pride parade. And being in Toronto in uniform, marching in that parade, again, unforgettable. So many people, everybody waving, so proud of us. And it's interesting to see the societal change on that, but it still ranks as one of my top 3 for sure.
And I see Michael has put his hand up. Michael, would you like to go ahead with your question?
Yes, I want to begin by thanking John for what he's had to say today. I admire the candor that you've been able to bring. And I also want you to know that that's certainly one of my favorite experiences was the raising of the flag as well. I'll never forget going out to the base and seeing all of that there and the flag going up. It was just remarkable, John. And so you need to be very proud of that because it's impacting so many of the rest of us and how we saw it. The question I had, John, what kind of support have you had from, I happen to know you have a partner, but also other people and that, and whether that's made a difference in how you've been able to manage?
Thank you very much, Michael. Yeah, so I have a partner. I'm remarkably lucky. My partner Dave has been with me for 26 years. I've been gone 12 of those 26 years. So he's very tolerant, very loving, independent, and amazing. So yeah, he's by far my biggest rock, my biggest support. Surprisingly, my last commanding officer who just left, he was available for anything. He was supportive. He's the one that advocated for us to have the pride flag up. He reached out to me a week before the Day of Remembrance to ask if I wanted to put a flag up on that day. He was so engaged with everything. His support's fantastic. Interestingly enough, as times have changed and there's less gay bars to go to and there's certainly less social activities in the last 2 years, despite that, I think my social network has grown and become more supportive. So people like Murray, people like Michael, there are just so many people in the community now that I didn't know 3 years ago. So I think that ability to make friends and social networks outside of the gay bar, outside of just the Friday night hangout, has been monumental. I don't think I've had more support in my life than I've had in the last 3 years.
Thanks, John. And Dave is kind of cute as well.
That doesn't hurt.
Michael, settle down. We have a comment from Eric. He says, thank you so much for being so open about your experiences. I know it's not easy.
I do get the fortune to tell my story more than once. And if nothing else, I hope my story and my experiences prevent somebody else from having to go through the same crappy journey that I went through. I think everybody deserves to be happy, and everybody deserves to do what they enjoy doing without some overarching entity saying you can't because you're gay, you can't because you're different than the rest. That whole mentality of let's get him, he's different, needs to go away.
I see we have two questions from the members. We'll go with Larry first, and then we'll go with Ace. So Larry, would you like to go ahead with your question?
Yes, it'll be a somewhat longish question. My area is medicine, which is an institution certainly of considerable power and not perhaps as overtly homophobic as the military, professional sports, and so on, but in some ways as deeply entrenched in conservative homophobic thinking. What I've found, and maybe it's a measure of my lack of courage or something, is it was easy to take a step forward and then move a step back. I went through a period when I thought I was required to explain every wrongdoing by a physician to all gay men, and every wrongdoing by a gay man to all my professional colleagues. And that back and forth thing to me was part of the struggle in attempting to change things and to deal with my own health issues. I wondered, John, whether you found is that anything similar to that in your experiences, moments of doubt as to whether you were really pursuing a track that was going to get you anywhere, or whether you were entirely convinced that you had the right way?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm a physician assistant, so I've been doing medicine for 33 years in the military. When I did my physician assistant training at the medical school in Borden, Ontario, I asked about, are we going to teach anything about gay health or lesbian health? I was shut down and told, we're not going to discuss that. That's enough. That's enough of that. And then I went on an obstetrics and gynecology rotation, and the doctor had assumed, anyway, we'd had our training on how to do procedures, and it was time for me to do my first PAP. And he says, well, you know where everything is. You know the anatomy, go in and do it. And I paused for a second and I looked at him and I said, I've never seen that before. I've seen it on paper. I've never seen it in real life. He looked at me and he stammered and he goes, well, I understand. My son's in Cirque du Soleil. So, but the battle continues. I mean, I tried to put out gay, trans, lesbian health pamphlets at work, and I thought, people listen to me. This is a good thing. We can put them in the waiting room and we can put them in the doctor's offices so that people aren't ashamed or aren't being seen reaching for these pamphlets that are in the best interests of their health. They lasted probably a day and they were gone. So I questioned them about it. Oh yeah, well, we were just cleaning up. So I get tired of the fight. There are days when I just get so exhausted. I'm like, why am I even doing this? Like, I don't understand why people don't understand. And I don't understand why I have to be the voice that's telling people this is what needs to change. We're supposed to be looking after our own. I mean, again, I work in a medical unit in the military, and we're supposed to look after each other. We're supposed to have the ability to keep people happy and well and healthy. And we seem to be missing that mark, and I don't know why. maybe they're just tired of listening to the same voice. Maybe as I fade into the sunset, the younger generation will pick up the torch. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but ageism is a real thing. Nobody wants to listen to an old queen drone on about what we need to do. So I found a remarkably handsome, capable young gay sailor in Edmonton who's gonna take the torch from me, and he is a force to be reckoned with. He has no appetite to hear no, and he is probably as assertive as I was years ago. So I think I'm losing the burning desire to fight. I still have a desire to fight. I just am losing that burning desire because it is unbelievably exhausting. I don't know if that answered your question or not, man.
It did.
Thank you. So Ace has a question and then Duncan will follow. So please go ahead, Ace.
As a transgender man, spent 30 years as a lesbian, I met the women who had been put on the path of being straight by groups of men who abused them. As lesbians, they felt that it was their job to turn them into straight women the hard way. So they have a lot of post-traumatic stress from their experiences of being abused in the military. But I also know that the military has changed a lot, because a friend of mine who transitioned, she was given a year off, and then after her transition was reinstated as a female officer, which is really good, because the veterans, the trans women who are veterans from the United States who have moved up north, especially during the Trump era, where they were so anti-trans, they said something scary like it could happen here again. You think that because it's solved once, all you need is a conservative government and a couple of people saying no, it can happen again. It can all go backwards. The exhausting work that you've put forward is not going to be in vain. I mean, passing this torch to this young sailor and the things that are being done, it's all worth it. I should be proud of the things that you have done to help out the community. I know the ageism gets in the way, but it's still good to have somebody who's had all this experience and making changes. But what about the fears that I hear from these trans women who are veterans of the United States coming up here, they're living here, and they're saying it could happen again in Canada? Is there a fear of that, in your opinion?
From the military perspective, I don't think so. I mean, I would like to think we're much more progressive than our southern neighbors.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, the fact that not only do we support trans members in the military, but like you say, we do whatever we can to accommodate them, to help them get to where they need to be in their journey of life without losing their job, without losing pay, without losing the potential for promotion. What we do is we just limit their activity to allow them that time to transition, and then nothing changes. They come back as a soldier.
Yeah.
We now have gone, we've got a few changes that have come out as well. We've now changed our dress regulations so that it's not clear cut that this is a female jacket and this is a male jacket. We've gone to that unisex approach. Our military driver's license, they've removed gender from all of our military driver's licenses.
Excellent.
If you're transitioning or transitioned, it is now no problems at all getting your military identification gender changed. I'm hoping that in the near future, they get rid of gender on our identification cards, and allow us also the opportunity to have X put on our, if they can't get rid of gender, at least have the option to have X put in there. The other issue we're facing with our trans population is our electronic health records only have male and female. There's no option for that. So I was on a working group last year on how we can change this program. It's an off-the-shelf program. It's not designed for hundreds of thousands of people. So it's a very difficult machine to change. So we found a small workaround that will help. But still, if we print off lab records for somebody, it's still going to have the gender at birth on it versus their current gender. And that's a challenge that we haven't beaten yet, but we're working on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Duncan, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a couple, Jan. John, nice to see you again. For those of you who don't know me, there's a lot of familiar faces on this grid today. I'm the president of the Primetimers Club here in Edmonton, and we were privileged. John, what was that, 3 years, 4 years ago now? When you
Yeah, 3 years anyway.
3 anyway, yeah. Okay. On Remembrance Day, was just happened to be the day we had our second Sunday in November meeting that year. So we were just enthralled to have John and Dave at our meeting. And I know I've got my work cut out for me between now and January 27th. Larry's asked me to be the guest speaker in a couple of months. I don't know if I'm going to be able to follow up with a story as inspirational and as moving as yours, John, but it's clear that there's been a lot of progress made in the industry, let's call it that, I guess, over the last 3 or 4 years, but it's just as clear maybe that there's still a lot of work to do. And I think it's all of our responsibilities as part of the community to be sharing in that workload, not necessarily specifically to the military, but in all of our walks of lives, and doing what we can to fight the good fight, so to speak. So Mike, our congratulations to you from the Primetimers Club. And in closing, I just wouldn't get too concerned about worrying about being an old queen droning on. Michael got reelected 3 times doing exactly that. So sorry, Michael, I couldn't resist. So anyway, I'll shut up now, but I'm really looking forward to sharing in the group again in a couple of months when we can talk about the Primetimers Club. So
Just remember, I'm a young queen.
Thanks, Duncan. And I know that this talk is specifically geared to the military, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the other changes that I've been able to help with. Both Murray and Michael were instrumental in helping to get the apology from the chief of police put out to our community. The previous chief of police refused to do it. He made it a very difficult endeavor. This chief, to his credit, instead of, so I'm not trying to poo-poo what Prime Minister Trudeau did. His apology was like a dead-end road sign, an apology, and that's all there is. When Chief McPhee did his apology, his was, first of all, he refused to make the apology until he had a plan of going forward after the apology. So I liken his apology to cutting the ribbon on a new highway that has off ramps and it has mile markers, so you can judge how far down this road you've gone. And again, Michael and Murray both had input on that. Murray and I had input on a document that went out to the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police on diversity and inclusion. So it's interesting that it's the older people in the community that are passing on all this knowledge. It's akin to being an elder, I guess. I'm not sure, but there is a young lad that's on the employ of the Edmonton Police Service as a civilian, and he does a lot of their diversity work, and he is one smart cookie. He is remarkably intelligent, well-spoken, and dialed in to the community. So again, I said a good shout out to Murray and Michael for both of them and their ongoing work in our community as well.
Said. We have a couple of comments. Bill Lee has said, "Thank you so much for your story, John. I cried."
Thank you, Bill.
We have a comment from Joan. "Thank you, John. I loved listening to an old queen. Your story was very moving, and you are a brave, brave soldier."
Thank you, Joe.
My personal opinion is you are a frontline warrior fighting the fight that's going to make changes for the next generations, and I'm grateful you're doing it.
Thank you. Takes many people to affect change.
Any other comments or questions for John? I see Larry has a comment or a question. Go ahead, Larry.
There is, and you'll doubtless have seen in the newscast, something about a same-sex sexual assault in the military. And what struck me was, well, to be blunt, the utter incompetence of the approach that was used. And I wonder, sexual assault will from time to time happen, and I wonder, is there effort to get some expertise in dealing with sexual assault, both heterosexual, homosexual, whatever, to get that level of competence so that it isn't handled quite as badly as this, at least to judge from the media, seems to have been done?
First of all, I know that same-sex assaults or same-sex abuse in the military is remarkably underreported. Again, it's the culture that
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
But after the Ducharme report came out on sexual misconduct in the military, we stood up something called a Sexual Misconduct Center. It's a 1-800 number. It's open 7/24. People can call to report any sexual misconduct to that line. They also have provided an app to everybody in the military that has a sexual response center app. So click into the app and it gives you resources. It gives you the number to call. If you click on your geographic locations, it'll give you police services, emergent, non-emergent numbers to call. The downside to that system is there's still investigations that are being conducted by the National Investigative Service, which is a branch of the military police. So we're still sort of stuck in that archaic investigating our own people. And the majority of people that are in this National Investigative Service are seasoned soldiers, so they carry a lot of beliefs from the past. And I would like to think that they are professional enough where they wouldn't do that, but I think we all know that there are some biases that will override our thought process. So I'm optimistic that going forward, this whole reporting process will be completely outside of the military. Having someone who has no vested interest in it, eventually that will step outside. And I'm sure that that's going to happen because what we're doing right now, there is a great deal of dissatisfaction in those that report. And I would hope that if we take it to an outside entity, it will be more open and it'll be easier for same-sex assaults and misconduct to be reported because, like I said, nobody wants to report that because it's still a cultural no-no.
Thank you, John.
John, I have a question. Where does Canada's military fit in with the rest of the world, as if you know, we're probably more colonized Christian countries to compare it to than the ones you mentioned before that it's still illegal. But are we pretty unique?
I think we're unique in that we had the apology. I think we're unique in, as a country, how welcoming and diverse we are. The UK just recently approved same-sex benefits for their military, so they're a little behind us. I would say probably the most progressive would be the Swedes and the Danes, probably followed by the Dutch. New Zealand is getting pretty close as well, so is Australia. They're very akin to Canada. So they're typical colonialized countries. with still their allegiance to the Queen and everything colonial on their uniform. But they're pretty similar to Canada. The States, I don't even know where to start there. But the UK, the Danes, the Swedes are probably the most progressive.
Good to know. Anybody else have a comment or a question for John? You've got us thinking so hard, John.
Okay, if I think my partner just came downstairs, so if there's going to be a smart ass comment, it'll probably be now.
Please say hi to Dave. Hello, honey.
Hello. He's working from home and I'm working from home 3 days a week. So it's been interesting. The first couple of weeks did not go well. So we decided that we would use this time as a practice for retirement. And as soon as we had that idea, everything just went so smoothly. He's
Well,
great.
retirement is really about fighting over who really can clean the toilet better.
That's why we hired someone.
Well, anyone else? Well, seeing nothing, and Duncan, I'd just like to comment to you, we can laugh during your presentation. It doesn't have to be, as thought-provoking as John's was. We seniors could have some humor. It'd be okay.
Well, Jan, John talked about, the socialization process and that his social network has improved. And I think that's something that prime timers can offer senior men, especially, obviously, but it doesn't all have to be about curing the world's ills overnight. It might be something as simple as deciding where should we go for dinner this month. And that's why we've got somebody like Eric in charge of dining out. So we're not always out to cure cancer. It's got to be about life and fun and being together at times too, I think.
Right. Well, with that, I'll close us down, and I would like to thank you very much, John, for such a thoughtful and wide-ranging talk. It's very dear to my heart. It was wonderful. Also, thank you to Kim Lauren for his signing and technical assistance. And thank you to all of you. I hope that we will see you next week on November 25th when our speaker will be Rob Browatsky, and he will speak to us on social and charitable roles of the Imperial Court of the Wild Rose. I'd also like to ask a further favor. You will be receiving an email with our survey. And if you could take a minute and fill out the survey, especially the area where other comments, other topics that you would like to see, it would certainly help us with our future programs. You can always contact us at agingwithpride@pridecenterofedmonton.ca. And now I return this meeting back to our host, Kim.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Goodbye, everyone.
And I'll see you later.
We will see you next week, 11 o'clock.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, John.